Hello and welcome to Martian Radio at the Theater. I am here with two amazing theater artists. I have Tangiene and Raysam from Free Soil Arts, and I am so excited to have both of them here to talk to me today. I would like the two of you just to introduce yourselves so that we can get this conversation started. So, Raysam, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Very glad to be here on the mothership that is Martian Radio Theater. So I am a born and raised Loyalian, in the Centerville area predominantly. I am an artist that likes to play with like the film medium mostly. I think like documentaries, comedies have mainly been the type of things I like making the most. And the Cookie Referendum was my first play that I've written that actually has gotten produced. So like just super thankful for all of the pieces that fell into place that like made it such an amazing show. Awesome.
And what are some other things that you've done in the area? Are there other organizations that you've worked with?
Yeah. So, and again, I spent basically my entire life here, right? But I would say just like the more notable projects that I made in the Lowell area was Days of Division, which was a documentary that I produced back in 2017, along with some of my classmates, Shailene and Bobby. And that was about the controversial debate that was happening over Lowell High School at the time, whether it should be re-renovated in the downtown area or building on, brand new over at Colley Stadium over in like the Belvedere neighborhood. And that was my first time seeing local politics get that animated in my city. And I was just like, oh, look, there's something like really interesting happening here between like these two groups, because it's not just about like, oh yeah, like where should we put the high school? Like there were a lot of interesting conversations about class, race, education, like the state of public education, the expectations that we have for our kids, like for the facilities, like, even politicians and who we hold to task as citizens as well. So that was also a school project that I did from Framingham State. And it was like my first time like really like doing a documentary with stakes that like, oh, I don't know what the ending is going to be, because like we were actively filming like during the I believe like it was like 2017 during that election of like, oh, like which counselors were going to be on which side of the fence here. And I would definitely say that being in that mode for the documentary and just being in kind of this like political fever pitch really put me in another space during that same year, 2017, where I was writing the Cookie Referendum. So like definitely those two projects, if you experience them back to back, you could see kind of like where things were at the time.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. And Tangiene, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, of course. It's great to be here. So my name's Tangiene Nyereyegona. I'm a Canadian-American artist, director. I do work as a stage manager and a performer as well. I studied at the University of the Arts. I studied directing, playwriting, and production, and I studied theater and sociology at York University. And I'm really excited about being able to use those two fields and combine them in my work and my practice.
Awesome. And what are some things besides Cookie Referendum, which we're going to talk about later? What are some other things that you've done in the area with theater or anything artistic in general?
Yeah, so I did work with Studio 506 Theater. I was a board member and a resident director with them. And I'm very excited to have been able to work with Free Soil. That was such an incredible opportunity for both of us, I think, and for so many of the folks who were involved as well. It really, you could tell that walking away from having worked with them was really life-changing for some folks.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna talk a little bit about Free Soil right now and your roles with the Cookie Referendum in particular. Raysam, you had said that you wrote the Cookie Referendum?
Yes.
Awesome. And what was your role in actually producing that and getting it on its feet afterwards.
Ooh, funny enough, the Cookie Referendum was also another school assignment for a creative writing class, and it I had like already like known like Krista just like through like everyone like we get to like know each other. It's like a really like small but like tight knit community, I would say. And even through, I want to say it was like a Kindred Project event by Maritza Grooms and Masada Jones that put it on. And then that's where Kristen and I reconnected. And then seeing her go through like her changes, her phases to eventually launching Free Solar Arts Collective, and just like their mission, especially of like being able to like have art be in Lowell. And of course it gets like there's no shortage of people who want to make that their mission in Lowell, but specifically to highlight BIPOC voices and like make sure that those works get put onto the forefront, to the point where it's like, oh yeah, like if you wanted to specifically like have a production like that is like BIPOC centered, focused, and like not just like, oh, who's like in front of the stage, right, but it's also like, oh, who's like doing some of the managing, like who is also like the vendors that we want to tap onto, and it being also so like community focused, right, like being able to have that mission of being able to highlight people who are like typically put onto the margins but still be like this true force in Lowell, that it's just like, oh yeah, like I would rather go to like Free Soil's Juneteenth events than the actual cities, because I'm like, I know that there is going to be a level of care, detail, and community that Free Soil is going to put onto their stuff. And again, like the quality is like never sacrificed for that kind of stuff either. So like they truly do dope work, and I can't stress enough for like anybody to like check out a production as soon as you see like the Free Soil logo at the very bottom of that poster.
Agreed.
Awesome. And Tangiene, what was your role within the Cookie Referendum?
Yeah, so I served as the director, and I was very honored to be able to fill that role.
Awesome. And how did you work with Raysam in terms of getting his words onto the stage, but still having your own directorial stance as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was a very collaborative process for us. And we both have our own visions. But I really, really wanted to support what Raysam was trying to say with this show. And I think in that we sort of had a united front. So really, when it came down to like the heart and the core of the show, I think there were no disagreements. Like we really had an understanding of what the show needed. Yeah.
Awesome. And speaking of the show, would either of you like to talk a little bit about what the Cookie Referendum is, and just give us a basic plot overview of it?
Sure. So the Cookie Referendum is an immersive satire play that takes place in a middle school election during a very contentious time. And issue number 1 is about how cookies are distributed in the school, right? I could leave it there. I could also like get into more details.
You can get into more detail.
Sure. So essentially how cookies are currently served over at Percy Charter Public School is all of the cookies are free for the students currently, served every Friday. But the upperclassmen, so say like the 5th graders up, right, they're a lot closer to the cafeteria where their classrooms are. So they just like go into the cafeteria and they just like gobble up all the cookies, right? All the underclassmen are a lot further away from the cafeteria. And by the time that their little legs get over to the lunch trays and all that, they're essentially met with crumbs, right? So you had 2 candidates with 2 different visions of how cookies should be given out in the school. The incumbent president, who was Brittany Thompson, been the president of the school since she was in the 1st grade, essentially. Her vision is saying like, hey, if we contract a local business to come into the cafeteria just to serve like, to make fresh cookies, just pay $1 and then everyone can get a fresh cookie whenever they want, right? So that way it's fair for everybody. versus the upperclassman candidate, Alex Bryce, who has never run for political office, is like more often on the side of like being in detention for his pranks at faculty and students and all that. But he was allowed to, run on the platform of no, we have to keep the way that we serve cookies the exact same. And their two visions and political styles clash in the play. And the immersive aspect of it is that it actually does take place at a middle school, right? Like even if they were like, hey, Raysam, you can put this play on, I can't even name a Broadway theater. Someone help me out here, please.
The Gershwin.
Thank you. But my assumption is that's not a middle school, right?
That is not a middle school.
Okay, great. I was about to say like the one. But no. I would say, so even if it were to be at a prestigious venue, theater, a lot of history, all that, like I would not want that because it has to take place in a middle school. You truly have to feel like there's gum under your seats and all these type of things, right? And, the actors address you and you could also ask them questions. And there's also student actors who are also planted in the crowds as well. And they have their own agenda and their role also is to get the audience like really like hyped up and feel like they're like, oh, wow, like I'm in it. And even within the program too, like there's like an actual ballot where people like have to like go and like check off and be like, okay, like I want to vote for Brittany, I want to vote for Alex, I want to maybe write in a candidate. So just to like be able to kind of capture like the kind of absurdity that is our two-party political system, like that is like the full ethos of the Cookie Referendum, I would say, and all the wacky hijinks that come with that.
That's awesome. And so you would put this on at a middle school.
Yes.
Meaning was the entire cast part of the middle school? Were they all middle school students?
Not really, actually. Tangiene, would you like to take this and kind of talk about the range of people that we had there?
Yeah, so we really had a very diverse cast, we had a huge range of ages and experience levels. And part of my approach to casting the students in particular was that I wanted them within themselves to represent the sort of interconnectedness of youth and adulthood. So in the breakdown of the cast, we have the students and the adults. So there's Miss Lauren, who is like the student government advisor, and we have Sammy, who is the maintenance person, and we also have the Principal Martin. And so they sort of filled the adult section of the cast, and the rest were students. So for the students, we had kids from 12 to 18. We had a group of students who were freshmen in college. Mm-hmm. So it was really important that I felt that we had that range of ages within the students. To also use as a sort of window for the audience into the play. So when they come in and they see that there are students who are of middle school age and there are also older students or there are maybe adults in the crowd, it sort of breaks that barrier, and it sort of allows the audience to see themselves as part of the world and as a middle schooler, and for them to insert themselves in that way.
Awesome. And was it challenging working with such a wide range of ages? Did you ever feel at any time that your directing may have been too rudimentary for the old people, or it might have been too complex for the younger kids in the cast? Or did you find it kind of easy to traverse that boundary?
So it was absolutely a challenge, and it was an exciting challenge for me. And it was really something that was very present for me in my planning and in how I approached designing the rehearsal process. So that was something that I I was a little bit worried about, I'd say, or not so much worried, but it was something that I was watching, something that I was very careful about, and that I wanted to give the actors the experience, or I wanted to give all of the actors the same experience. I really didn't want the older actors to feel like they were being, patronized, or feel like they were needing to go over things that they had learned before, or redoing things like that. And for the younger actors, I really wanted to make sure that they felt challenged, but they didn't feel like they were in over their heads, or like we were throwing too much at them. So it really was a balance. We needed to find a very delicate balance between those two objectives. And one of the ways that we did that is through the warm-up process. Our warm-ups were really something that allowed everyone to come together and to kind of see themselves as a human in the process, not as a kid, not as an older actor, to see themselves as a member of that ensemble.
I would also like say, if I could just add on to like the maybe you thought that it was a challenge, or put it like this, right? When I saw you just do the type of directing that you were doing, right, between like the warm-ups and like the notes and all that stuff, like anyone could do that, right? But it was more so a thing where I did not think that the Cookie Referendum was going to be a particularly like challenging piece, because it's just like written in such an accessible way, right? And that's not to say that there isn't like a lot of hard work that goes into theater, like of course there is, right? But the fact that Tangiene also had to like direct an entire room, right? Like it's not just like the actors that are on stage there, right? But it's also like okay, this side of the room, even if you're not looking at them, you could be like, okay, I felt like the energy in this side was a little low. Let's see if we can add this more, right? What other things are the other actors in the crowd supposed to be doing to like really like help like make this feel as immersive as possible, right? So it's like doing this kind of like 360 acting that like I didn't even like think that like, oh yeah, like that would have to be something that a director who handles this work has to do, to be able to like not just be a directing force on stage, but also being able to like have a command of the entire room. And I really do want to give props to you that you did that, and excellent. And it looked effortless. So I was just like, I'm not sure if this was a challenge for you or not, but I'm just saying like that would be challenging for anybody being put in that position. So definitely props to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome, because usually a director's job, their job's usually done at the last dress rehearsal, but it sounds like you had to be part of that immersive experience the whole time, which hadn't really occurred to me with that immersive theater experience. So that sounds really cool, and it sounds like a fun challenge that you handled really well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think the actors walked away with a lot. I think they took a lot from it, and I think it was really interesting because the younger actors walked away feeling more mature. I could tell that they had grown in that sense, and they had really learned a lot from the older actors. And I think what really surprised me was how the older actors seemed to have responded to that. Like they really got a lot out of working with the students, and they got to be kids as well, and they got to feel like leaders as well in that sense. So there was both of those things going on that they got to take from it.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about working with children is that they have a level of play that a lot of adults lose as they get older, and they're able to make these big, bold choices that some adults, they box themselves in. They're afraid to make those choices when they get older later in life. So it sounds like this experience let that the older actors lose those inhibitions a little bit and allowed themselves to play with the children, which sounds like such a fun experience.
Yeah, it's really a unique breakdown, because I've never worked with a cast quite like this. I've worked, exclusively with children or with older, more experienced actors. Maybe sometimes there's, I did a production of Marie Antoinette, an adaptation written by David Ajmi, and there's one child role, or I've had, these experiences where there are maybe a couple of younger roles in a cast of more experienced actors. And this was really unique in that way, that it was such a more even split. And I've never seen another play that breaks down like that. And it was really, really cool to discover the sort of humanity that emerged from having a cast that was structured in that way.
And I would even say within that too, right, where it's just like everyone comes from a different level of play and energy, experience, all that stuff, but even just getting into the nitty gritty of the politics of it, right? We would have these table reads where, beat by beat, we're having fun, where there's certain lines where we're oh yeah, this is funny, this and that, but there are also these very interesting revealing character moments. And I think I came from Javian one time during our rehearsals, who plays Alex, and he's just wait, why are all of the grades having lunch at the same time, right? Why aren't they rationing out? Why aren't they doing these type of things, right? And on one level, you could be oh, that's just the world of the play, don't worry about it. But I'm no, I fully let's encourage and have those kind of conversations of why do they have it this way? Then even some maybe even Kyle, who played the principal, would be oh yeah, maybe they're just acting their wage, right? That kind of thing where it's okay, you've been working, overworked, all that kind of stuff too. Do the cafeteria staff really care one way or the other who gets a cookie or not, right? They see the problem, right? There is structural things that we could do here, but it is a really interesting thing to kind of see oh, even among the cast, which way that they would vote, right? But between Brittany, Alex, Gigi as well, who is a surprising star, I would say, because she was in terms of my revisions for Cookie Referendum, it, she was one of the more recent additions that I had. She was not in the original draft of it, and the response that Gigi got consistently across the performances, even though there's only a couple of lines that she has, yeah, people fully were you know what, yeah, I'm going this way. I didn't know that was an option, but it was, I don't know, there was just a really interesting things that people were taking the politics of the play so seriously, of what if this character was actually putting this option? Do we really feel comfortable with having this person in the leadership seat, based off of what they're willing to do to get it?
Yeah, and when it comes to the politics of the show, because you did describe it as a satire, are you satiring a specific election, or were you really just satiring specific tropes of political characters?
Well, put it this way, right? I know 2016, all that stuff, the Trump Hillary election was definitely in the air of it. But I was in a place where even just within my own political education, all that kind of stuff, right? I was just can we get out of just this can we just stop pretending that this is a very unique binary of this candidate versus that candidate? I don't like either. Where do you really fall within that? How out of a slate of maybe 10 people on each side, right, or on the two party sides, did we get down to these two that most people weren't really feeling, or at least the people who were around me, right? And it was just this kind of maddening thing of this goes as far back as not as far back, but there has been South Park episodes written about the two-party system. There have been episodes of Community, which is also an inspiration for me for this play, of just the kind of ridiculousness of just putting these two options forward that are non-perfect solutions, like, and just like seeing the dynamics of like, you can be fully running on a platform of like keep everything the same, unequal, whatever, but as long as you're funny, as long as you can get like a crowd riled up in the right way, like they'll just be like, yeah, like even if it's like against their own interests too, right? And even on the other side with the Britney character, I tried doing a thing where I was playing with class in a very specific way, right? Where it's just like, okay, yeah, like even though Britney is representing the underclass when she says these things of like, oh, we want to have cookies that are equal for everybody as long as you have $1. But like that caveat cuts the equalness of it, right? It really does, right? And there are legitimate things where you're like, okay, like if my family and I are not in the economics place to be spending $1 on a cookie each time, then like you just essentially took the class goalpost of it being closer to the cafeteria to an actual economic class a type of thing here, right? So I just think that, and I'm not sure like how deep we want to get into it. Put it like this, right? We did a recording of the last performance, which in my opinion was like one of the best performances, is when everyone, the crowd included, was truly on their A game. So like the Cookie Referendum will be out for people to experience what it was like. And I say that to say that like after this entire time of just like the stakes and the listening and all that kind of stuff that we heard from these particular candidates, decisions were made by people even more powerful than the ones that were displayed to us, that truly had the agency to make the change for us, right? And that's not even something that we can vote for. It's not even something that we can see. That feels maddening to me. Like that feels like so what was like even the point of doing that, right? And it's like, I don't know, like it's just like this like really weird place of like, oh, like what does power mean? Like what does agency mean in a system like that? Like what kind of like reforms would even need to be happening? Like is reform even possible for like the people to truly feel like they have like a sense of like direction and trying to see like, oh, like which way we want to like steer the country, whether that be in like in policy, whether that be in education and all of those kind of things. It's a very long-winded way to say that there was a lot of things that I was trying to pack into this very short play. And I was just super like glad to hear that like between like the people who are performing in the play, whether they're on stage or in the crowd, but like also the audience as well, like they did come away. When I was having a couple conversations with people, just being like, oh, like this really made me think about like, oh, what are we doing?
Yeah,
you know, like that. And I'd be curious too, like of just like on anything I said there, like what would be like the response, or like what are the feelings that y'all are having to that?
Oh, well, I thought it was so cool that you really present this like very clear and accessible metaphor for people to really think about like serious systemic solutions. And people really got involved and engaged in that. And, you know, that's testament to you, your writing and your artistry. You know, you really created the grounds for that. You created the world for that to happen, you know, for people to really think about how we fix things on a level that is approachable, you know, that people can really find themselves in, they can see themselves in. They, you know, you present this this sort of dilemma that people want to answer, you know, and a lot of the time it's very scary to think about solutions on a larger scale, you know, so this work is really needed. You know, we need a way to think through things that isn't so scary because, you know, especially right now in the world, things can be so overwhelming, you know, and it becomes hard to look at things clearly. So, you know, kudos to you for allowing a way for people to do that, and a way that excites people
Mm-hmm.
and makes them want to do it, you know?
Oh yeah, we bribe them with cookies too.
Uh-huh. Stickers.
Yeah, no, we had cookies, we had stickers, and it was truly like such like a fun time too. Just like also like
Yeah.
listening to people's rationale on like which way they voted and all that stuff too. Like that was. And again, like they didn't know like how it was going to end either, which is also, again, I'm trying to keep all of it for the watch the performance, y'all. Watch the performance. Find me in the streets, and then give me your opinions. Find either of us in the streets, or not. I'm not sure. I can't speak for Tangiene's level of privacy, but but yeah, no, it was truly like a super exciting time, and I'm just so glad to just have more immersive media out there that like isn't just something that's like, oh yeah, you have to have it on like this like super high level where it's like you can truly get meta when you like pull in the audience into a work, but it's just like, oh, you could just do it on like a low stakes political thing in a middle school. It's fun and all that, but like there are so many things where they're like, oh, like I recognize that in my local councilman. Yes. Like I like recognize that in my senator, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, what do we do?
Yeah, I honestly got chills when you were talking about the purpose and the impact that your show has had, because it really is such a simple metaphor. But it sounds, just by all the thought and intent that has gone into it, that the two of you and the rest of your ensemble and production staff had really made that difference in the people that have seen that production so far. Is there any plan to take the Cookie Referendum any further than that production with Free Soil?
We have been in talks about, and again, this is my first play. I have no, or rather, like me, Raysam, I did not know like, oh, you could put these things up on like New Play Exchange, so like that way, like other people could like potentially license it and perform it in other places. Like I would love to see more companies than like just Free Soil be able to like tackle this work, because I do think that you could play this in like New York, Ohio, California, any of these type of things. Like we're all feeling this same thing in this very like political stew, and maybe the way that people vote would be like the one variable, but that ending, I'd be really curious to see how that plays in other places. So New Play Exchange, that's definitely something. I don't have any like serious plans for just like an expansion of it, because like it is in fact a very short play as well, and it's meant to be that. And the only additions that I did have were just like, okay, like a character here represent that, a character here represent that, but that's it. Like that final act, especially after the scene with the principal, is supposed to like leave you in a place of just like, oh, that's it? Like there has to be more. Like please tell me there's more. And it's just like, no. But people have also like said like, oh, like it would be really interesting to see the Cookie Referendum in like a film format. Like if it was like, if you actually were to like produce it like maybe Bo Burnham 8th grade style type of thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like that I would be interested in. That's like more the world I come from. But like I guess like my only hang up with it was like, oh, but like that immersive factor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's like, Tangiene, like I'd be curious to know like if you think that the short film factor, I don't know. I guess I'd be like curious to know like do you think it could work as a short film or be as impactful as the play?
Well, I think the story itself is so kind of universal that it can work in so many different forms. Like it really could. I think the immersive component is really something that enhances and sort of heightens the message. So, and maybe I'm biased because
Sure.
I do love theater so much, but I think that it does translate, and it would translate very well to film, to to other mediums. Yeah, the story itself, it would work. Yeah,
sure. I think people were like, even like in post show, just like pitching me like, it's like, oh, you could expand Gigi's character with this one. Like people wanted to see more from these characters, especially because they're again like there's like, even again it's a short play, but like I try as much as possible in that those like dialogue moments and all these, and even like the actors too, like I really have to like give so many props to people, because again like they're like, I feel like the funniest moments of the show where it's like stuff that I didn't even have on the script, right? like and that goes right for both like the performers and also like the audience members as well. Like there was this Kat who was like our props master for this one, like leading on for art direction, all that kind of stuff, right? And just during our rehearsal, we were like, oh, yeah, like, you know, we're trying to like train them on the improv section of it where they actually have to like think on their toes. And I was just like, yeah, I don't know what you're gonna ask, but just like ask them a question as you would experience it. And it was like the line that was just like, okay, yeah, we're talking about all these cookies and all that. Is there a vegetarian or a vegan option for any of these things? And, you know, the two, JP and Mercy, they just like look at each other and they're just like, absolutely not. It was like the one moment where they're like, even though they're foes, they're yes-anding each other, and that's such a great way where they were like, I'm not gonna eat a kale cookie. Like, and then there was another one that was just like, oh yeah, like we could, the chocolate chips are fine, like they're $1. You think that we could afford the other ones? It's gonna be $5. Be for real. Like, and like that just got like such a big laugh from everybody. I'm like, we need to have this question in every performance afterwards. So like, and even the ending too, like that was also something that Faith was just like, oh yeah, it'd be really funny if this happened. And I'm like, oh no, we're using that. Like that's to me like just those aspects of the collaboration was, it's like, oh, like this just makes it and heightens it to a point where I'm like, I just love that we're all working on this. Like I really do love that like the people that were in the roles that they were just excelled, right? Like it was just awesome.
Did you have to train your actors to be able to improvise in the ways that they did, or were you able to cast people that naturally had those abilities?
So it was definitely part of like our audition process and what we were considering and evaluating as we were casting. You know, we did sort of we gave improv exercises to see how they responded, you know, to see you know, how comfortable they were with that, you know, if they could grow, if they could learn the improv elements. Yeah, and that was something that we really focused on in the rehearsal process. Yeah, we had a lot of help from Casey Woods, who he played Sammy. So he was a member of our cast, and he's also a stand-up comic and an improv comedian. So he really helped us out a lot in teaching improv principles and in sort of guiding and leading by example in that sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and even like that improv factor, like really, it was important for like not just the two candidates or like, you know, the people are going to ask them like the questions, but it was really important that like everybody was in on those improv exercises and activities, because like, you know, when you think about like, oh yeah, like the performers that are in the crowd as well, like we were like, hey, like there are going to be people sitting next to you who are like looking at you funny, and when they're like, oh, you're cheering, you're doing this and that, right? Like we can give you the beats of that kind of stuff, but like I can't write dialogue for the conversation you're going to have with the family next to you about like, oh, what thing that you really like, this and that. Like, and I think even in like during like the Butler performances, the one that I was able to sit on, they were just like, you're in the 7th grade, and they were like, yeah, I am. And they're just like, no way. And there's like a full like college student, but they stuck with it, right? It really was a thing where it's like, no matter how hard it got, like truly stick with your character, truly like stick with like your castmates as well, because like they really did become family, like at least by the very end. Like I'm not sure like at what moment was like the real like, oh, we're bonded in this, like we really are a family that's just going to like see each other succeed in this. And that was like a really beautiful thing.
When you wrote this play, did you intend for the middle school characters to be played by actual middle schoolers, or did you intend these roles to be played by adults and you just so happen to have a cast of middle schoolers available?
Yeah, no, it's been middle school like from the start. It was like very and again, like it goes back to like the Days of Division thing, right? Where I was just like, oh, like the type of major political discussions that were going on at the time were happening on like this like kind of micro level with the Lowell High School, right? Where there was a lot of interesting conversations about race, class, etc. But I was just like, oh, I wonder if we could even like, and again, like because it was a school, it was an argument over a school. I was just like, I wonder if we could like bring that even more, right? Because like all the adults are having this conversation about like, oh, like where the best place for the high school would be, zoning laws, this and that, right? But I'm like, oh, like I wonder if I could do something that gives political stakes for kids, right? And that like an adult, if you just like were to walk into the world and of like the auditorium, you'd also be like, oh, I now have opinions about the way that these cookies should be distributed in the school. So I think that factor of like like it could happen on any level was truly something that I'm like, oh yeah, like this has to be it.
And so you actually gave the audience members ballots to vote. Did you actually tally those every night for the performances?
We did. It was harder to get the ballots out of the box, I will say. But we did actually do like some counting of that. And it was a consistent question of our audience member. They're being like, oh, are you actually going to tell us what it is? And we have yet to. I don't think we like truly gave them a hard promise. If we were going to give you like be like, oh yeah, these were the numbers, right? But point being is that we saw a variety, like a lot more. I could say this, a lot more GG votes than I was expecting. Like true, because again, like she's such a one-off character too. She has like maybe a couple of lines, and then just goes back to her seat. And then people were like, yeah, I'm still sticking with that radical back there, right? That was just talking about brownies. But yeah, no, I so point being is that like I currently do not have the numbers right in front of me.
But did you notice a difference based off like the demographics of your audience that came in per performance? If some groups voted more one way than another way, or based on the actor's performance that night? Did you notice any differences like that?
I would say like the one I can like really pick was just like between like the difference between the middle school performance and the public performances, right? Like that was like I feel like a really big thing where, and I just so happened to be sitting in the audience for the second performance, right? But it was a thing where the kids were so stoked on Alex. Like they loved Alex so much, and no matter like what he said, like it was just like the funniest thing. Like they were like, yeah, like just like scream all that stuff, right? And the thing about the play is that it's supposed to have like a balance, even though like the Brittany character is playing kind of like the straight-laced kind of character in that way, right? But, you know, I was sitting next to this group of boys, like I think 7th graders, right? And they were just like, yeah, we're voting for Alex. Yeah, Alex. And after I was just like, okay, like why? Like not even being like, don't vote that way, but just like a genuinely like, what were you getting from this particular character? And they were like, you know, he's funny. He doesn't want us to pay for anything. You know, things are like hard around our family. Like they were mentioning like, oh yeah, like if like there are kids that live in poverty, like they can't pay the dollar for the cookie. And I'm like, oh, like these are like a lot more balanced answers that I was getting from this small group of kids versus like the mania that was the rest of the crowd there too. But I do also feel like it was a really important lesson for Mercy, who was playing Brittany, right? Where it's like they were a very tough crowd to her, especially. Like it was like it was like truly the first time that I felt like I wrote something and somebody got hurt by just reading the lines, right? And that did not make me feel good like at all, because I'm like, y'all truly were like the perfect people for these roles, and I don't want you to internalize that like, oh, people don't like you specifically, right? Like maybe Joffrey from Game of Thrones or like any other character that's been like massively disliked feels like a similar thing there. But the way that like the cast was able to like really like rally around them and just being like, hey, like they don't like it's not you, it's the character, they're doing this and that, and even just being able to like talk more with Mercy afterwards and just being like, hey, like yes, like they were totally with this character, sure, whatever. But when I was also talking to that same group of 7th graders, and I was just like, hey, like this is also the platform that Brittany had. And after they were like, oh, we didn't realize that because we couldn't hear her.
Yeah.
Right. Like that was the other thing too, where it's just like, how many times do we have like exercises of like projection and all that kind of stuff? And it's like way different when you actually have like so many like bodies in the crowd that are just like screaming at decibels that weren't even rehearsing for, right? So it was a thing where it's just like, okay, the cast family comes together, like you have like this total inner strength that allows you to keep on going and keep on being like, you know what, like I'm going to do even better in the next rehearsal, I'm going to think even more on my toes. Like it really was taken as like this like challenge where like everybody had your back, right? So that was the time where I was just like, oh man, like just seeing like it shifts so one way towards Alex. And I really do feel that Mercy internalized that, took it, and was just like, okay, even between our notes before the public show, she was able to like totally flip out on a dime and really like make her case, and people were able to hear it, and people were able to have that confliction, right? Like people were truly able to like, again, we even got some interviews afterwards, right? And then we're like, oh, I gotta give it to Alex on these certain things, but I also felt this way about Brittany and about this way. So like, and that was happening on both sides. So like that was like a really interesting thing there too. So I really do think that the public performances, like they had a little bit more of a mixture in the crowd, but the middle schoolers were going all in on Alex as far as I could tell.
Awesome. Do either of you know what's next on the agenda for Free Soil Arts?
I can't say so, honestly. Krista Brown is like the main founder and CEO of it. I'm sure that's going to be an amazing work. No matter what it is, I hope I can get tickets to it. But I can confirm I'm not a part of it currently.
And my one last big question is, how would you like to see the arts in Lowell specifically grow, evolve, change? What are the aspects of Lowell theater that you really like, and what do you think could be really improved in this area?
I'd look to you, Tangiene, because you're more in the theater world than I.
Well, I think opportunities like this are really a gateway into like a larger world in Lowell. And I really think there are great developments happening. The work that Krista is doing with Free Soil is really changing the landscape and is really opening it up. So I would like to see more of that happening, more of those voices and more of those opportunities, and more of those people, making themselves seen and heard, and sharing their artistry. I would love to see more of that.
And I would even just to tack on to that as well, I would definitely love to see more youth-centered plays as well. Like I think that like and again, it was one of the biggest challenges of even just like casting in general, where like I'm putting out like calls and like my story being like, hey, if you have a niece or something like that, like let them know, because I don't have young people following me on Instagram. But Aaron's Presence, who like, they came through. Like they're another nonprofit that, Free Soil, like they made like that connection too, and that's like I think another great thing about Free Soil too, like the real like network and like the yearning to like do work with such an awesome organization and just like deliver like just like the bulk of our youth, if not all of our cast, who like literally like every single person that came through the door was just like excited at the prospect of potentially doing something on stage. So like I think that like there's like a major hunger, especially among like those like age groups too, to just be able to like do something after school, like besides like their homework or sports or anything else like that. And that we're not just like all hinging it on like the schools who like may or may not have a theater program or not. So I'd like to see more of that be in the mix, because there's definitely a talented young base here.
Absolutely, yeah. Those connections are really important. The show would not have been what it was without that connection with Aaron's presence. Every single one of our student performers was from Aaron's presence. Yeah, and there are organizations like that with people who are just, like you say, just so hungry and so wanting to be involved. And I think back to when I was their age. I would have loved an opportunity like this. I would have been so thrilled, so excited at even the prospect of something like this. So I agree, I think it's really important to elevate young voices and to show them, that they can be professionals, they can do this work, and they matter, they are important. Yeah.
Awesome. It was so great talking to the both of you today. Are there any plugs that you'd like to make of any performances you have coming up, anything you may be working on, anything that you're looking for people to collaborate with you on, like contact information if they want to get in contact with you, anything like that?
I'm recently in the middle of a personal rebrand. I just bought a domain site, bought the domain name, but you can follow me currently on Instagram at rayviation.rocks. And I'm trying to be more, have more of a presence there, like as like new projects come up. But I'd say like that's where you could find like my main updates.
Anything for you, Tangiene?
Yeah. I'm always looking to collaborate. I'm also on Instagram at just my first name, Tangiene.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for talking to me today. This has been Martian Radio at the Theater, and we will have links to the organizations, and once the Cookie Referendum video is out, we will put a link in the description of this episode as well. So thank you both for being here, and thank you all for listening.
Hey gang, this is Wednesday and you've been listening to a Martian Radio program. Martian Radio Theater is a queer art collective based in Lowell, Massachusetts, focused on creating space for queer voices and experimenting with different media. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, and Instagram. Wherever we are, you can almost always find us using the tag @MartianRadioTheater. Check out our website, martianradiotheater.space, for cool upcoming local events and to sign up for our newsletter. And we hope you support us by sharing our work, talking kindly of us to folk, or becoming a patron at patreon.com/MartianRadioTheater. To repeat that, our social media is @MartianRadioTheater. Our website is www.martianradiotheater.space. And our Patreon is patreon.com/MartianRadioTheater. Hope we get to spend time together again soon. But till then, happy trails, partner. Take care.